Right then, pull up a chair, grab a pint, or a cup of tea if you're feeling proper, and let's talk about the original femme fatale, the lady who danced her way into history books and then, well, straight into a firing squad. We're diving into the ridiculously dramatic, unbelievably glamorous and ultimately tragic tale of Mata Hari. Now, forget everything you thought you knew about your grandma's knitting circle. Mata Hari was no ordinary woman. She was a whirlwind of exotic mystery, a stage sensation who captivated audiences across Europe, and a woman who managed to become one of history's most infamous spies, or at least accused of being one. Was she a cold-blooded double agent, a naive dancer caught in the gears of war, or just a woman who liked a bit too much attention and a lot of expensive trinkets? Let's crack open this enigma, shall we? Our story doesn't begin in some shadowy Parisian alley, no. It starts in a perfectly respectable, rather dull Dutch town called Leeuwarden, back in 1876. There, a girl named Margaretha Geertruida MacLeod was born. Yeah, Margaretha. Doesn't exactly scream sultry spy, does it? But this lass had a spirit bigger than the North Sea. See, Margaretha was a bit of a handful, even as a child. She had a taste for the dramatic, a mischievous glint in her eye, and a definite aversion to anything that smacked of ordinary. Her childhood was eventful. Her dad was a hat maker, then went bankrupt. Her mum died young. She was sent to a boarding school to become a kindergarten teacher, but got expelled for flirting with the headmaster. Clearly teaching toddlers wasn't her true calling. Then at 18, she saw an advertisement in a Dutch newspaper. Officer in the East Indies seeks wife. Now, most sensible girls would think, sounds a bit risky, doesn't it? But Margaretha thought, adventure, exotic lands, escaping this dreary existence. So, she replied, and she married a Dutch colonial officer named Rudolf MacLeod, a man twice her age and by all accounts, a bit of a boor, prone to drinking and, shall we say, unfaithfulness. So off they went to the Dutch East Indies, modern-day Indonesia, a place bursting with vibrant colours, exotic sounds, and for Margaretha, a whole lot of loneliness. Her marriage was a disaster. Rudolf was a brute. She had 2 children, one tragically died young, and life as a colonial wife was stifling. But it was there, amidst the oppressive humidity and the cultural richness, that Margaretha started to transform. She became fascinated by Javanese culture, particularly their traditional dances. She absorbed it all, the movements, the stories, the spiritual connection. This wasn't just a hobby, it was an escape, a revelation. She was learning to move her body in ways that spoke of ancient mysteries, far removed from the polite Dutch drawing rooms. After years of misery, Margaretha finally fled back to Europe, leaving her husband and her restrictive life behind. She arrived in Paris in 1903, a woman with no money, no connections, and a single talent, dancing. But not just any dancing. She'd transformed those Javanese movements into something utterly unique, something tantalizingly suggestive, something exotic. And this, my friends, is where Margaretha MacLeod died, and Mata Hari was born. She claimed her name meant Eye of the Day in Malay, which, conveniently enough, also means the sun. A bit theatrical, wouldn't you say? Perfect for a woman who was about to burn brightly. Her act wasn't just a dance, it was a performance, a ritual. She stripped off veils one by one, bathed in a single spotlight, telling stories of ancient Hindu goddesses and sacred temple dances. It was daring, it was scandalous, and it was utterly captivating. Audiences were mesmerized. She wasn't just a dancer, she was an experience. She played on European fantasies of the Orient, creating a persona that was both alluring and mysterious. She was, to put it mildly, a sensation. Kings, princes, politicians, industrialists, everyone wanted a piece of Mata Hari. She became a courtesan to the powerful and the wealthy, living a life of unimaginable luxury, flitting between grand hotels and exclusive salons. Now, here's where things get proper sticky. World War I breaks out in 1914. Europe is plunged into chaos, and suddenly everyone's looking for traitors under every bed. Mata Hari, with her international connections, her countless lovers, her penchant for secrets, and her constant travel across borders, because she was Dutch, a neutral country, she could travel more freely, became an obvious target for suspicion. She had an uncanny ability to charm information out of powerful men, a talent honed through years of performing and courtesanship. Was she doing it intentionally for espionage, or was it just part of her allure, a byproduct of her profession? This is where the lines begin to blur, and the tragedy truly begins. The official story, the one that landed her in front of a firing squad, is that she was recruited by German intelligence, Abwehr, in 1916. They allegedly gave her the codename H-21. The French, meanwhile, suspected her of being a German spy from the get-go. She claimed she was working for the French, trying to be a double agent. But the French intelligence didn't exactly trust her. It was a proper mess, like trying to untangle a ball of yarn after a cat's had a go at it. By the way, get this, before Mata Hari became a celebrated dancer, she briefly joined a circus in Paris, performing as an equestrian. She actually tried to make a living riding horses before her exotic dancing career took off. Imagine that, from riding ponies to seducing generals. Quite the career progression, eh? She was accused of passing secrets to the Germans, of compromising Allied military plans. The evidence against her was circumstantial, largely based on intercepted German telegrams that were open to interpretation, and the testimony of disgruntled lovers and suspicious intelligence officers. But in the paranoia of wartime, circumstantial evidence was often enough. They needed a scapegoat, a glamorous villain to distract from the brutal reality of the trenches. And Mata Hari, with her flamboyant lifestyle and her mysterious past, fit the bill perfectly. What if Mata Hari had never left the circus? What if she'd found a way to truly embrace her talent for riding and performing, rather than seeking solace in the arms of wealthy, powerful men? Perhaps she would have lived a long, unstoried life as a respected equestrian, far from the clutches of wartime espionage. Or what if she had been more strategically astute, less naive about the dangers of her lifestyle? If she had truly been a master spy, perhaps she would have known when to play her cards closer to her chest, when to disappear, when to stop trusting those who sought to use her. Her downfall, in many ways, was a tragic combination of ambition, naivete, and the cruel opportunism of war. Let's give this a think. Was there moral clarity in Mata Hari's actions? This is where it gets blurry. From her perspective, she was a survivor, using her charms and talents to secure a luxurious life. She probably saw herself as navigating a complex world, perhaps even believing she could play both sides. But from the perspective of the nations at war, her allegiances, or lack thereof, were a grave moral hazard. Her purpose shifted constantly, from escaping a bad marriage to seeking fame and fortune, to perhaps trying to be a double agent for a cause she barely understood. What was her ultimate purpose? Was it patriotism? Unlikely. Was it survival? Absolutely. Was it a desire for attention and adoration? Undeniably. Her core purpose seems to have been personal freedom and self-preservation, even if it meant dancing on the edge of a precipice. She was driven by a powerful need to escape the constraints of her original life and create something extraordinary for herself. This desire for agency and self-definition, while admirable in peacetime, became a dangerous liability during wartime. Did her actions align with a consistent set of values? This is the toughest question. Her public persona, Mata Hari, was a fabrication, a performance. The real Margaretha was a woman seeking escape, seeking excitement, seeking security. Her integrity, if you can call it that in the context of espionage, was highly situational. She was willing to bend truths, charm secrets, and live a life of artifice to achieve her goals. It's less about a moral failing and more about a complete disregard for the rules of the game she inadvertently stumbled into. She was a chameleon, adapting to survive, and that adaptability was both her greatest strength and her fatal flaw. You see, she was rooted in self-invention. She created Mata Hari. She didn't want to be Margaretha MacLeod, the bored Dutch housewife. She wanted to be the exotic dancer, the mysterious beauty, the woman who commanded attention and desire. This drive for self-creation was so powerful that it overshadowed any sense of national loyalty or political caution. She lived in a world of performance, and when the real world of espionage collided with it, she couldn't differentiate between the stage and the battlefield. So, was she a cunning spy or a tragic victim? It's probably a bit of both, leaning heavily towards the latter. Her strategic awareness was, frankly, abysmal. She operated in a world where information was currency and trust was a luxury, yet she seemed to believe her charm would protect her. Her goal was to maintain her lavish lifestyle, her freedom, and her status. The constraints were the rising paranoia of wartime intelligence agencies and her own somewhat naive understanding of the gravity of her situation. She thought she could play games without real consequences, that her charm and status would always be her shield. Her primary trade-off was between maintaining her personal freedom and potentially endangering national security. For Mata Hari, personal freedom always won out. The moral dilemma for the French authorities was whether to execute a woman whose guilt was far from certain, but who served as a perfect symbol of wartime betrayal. They chose the latter, prioritizing the psychological impact on the public over absolute proof. Could it have gone differently? Absolutely. If she had been more cautious, if she had avoided associating with certain individuals, if she had taken the warnings more seriously, she might have avoided her fate. If the French intelligence had been less desperate for a conviction, or if the intercepted telegrams had been interpreted with more nuance, the outcome could have been entirely different. She was a pawn, albeit a very flamboyant one, in a much larger, darker game. Ultimately, the net closed in. In February 1917, Mata Hari was arrested in her hotel room in Paris. The trial was a farce, conducted largely in secret, with flimsy evidence and a desperate need for a scapegoat. Despite her pleas of innocence, despite her claims she was working for the French, she was convicted of espionage and sentenced to death. On October 15, 1917, Margaretha Zelle, the woman who had dared to dream of a life beyond the ordinary, the woman who had become the enigmatic Mata Hari, faced a firing squad at Vincennes, just outside Paris. She reportedly refused a blindfold, looked her executioners in the eye, and blew them a kiss. Even at the end, she was performing, maintaining the illusion, the defiant, glamorous spy, until her last breath. Her death served as a stark warning, a grim reminder of the brutal realities of war and the dangers of playing a double game. But it also cemented her legend. Was she a villain, a patriot, a victim? Perhaps she was simply a woman who tried to live by her own rules in a world that demanded conformity, a world that ultimately crushed her. Mata Hari's story isn't just about spies and secrets. It's about identity, about how we construct ourselves, and how those constructions can both empower and ultimately entrap us. It's a tale about the allure of the exotic, the harsh realities of war, and the often unjust consequences for those who dare to defy societal norms. She was a woman who danced between worlds, between truth and illusion, and paid the ultimate price for it. Her legacy remains a tangled web of fact and fiction, much like the veils she once shed on stage. Stay curious, stay sharp, and stay just sober enough to remember it all. This was just a swig of history, and if it wasn't in your textbook, it bloody well should have been. And before you go, do a brother fav and like, share and subscribe.